Welcome to True Crime with Strategic Eyes.
Strategic back again. What's going on, guys? Hope you guys had a great week so far. We purposely left out the yay because we got a real serious story we want to talk about today. I didn't plan on covering this story, but I felt in my spirit that I needed to talk about it because I think there's lessons that we could learn from this. We're talking about the tragedy today that occurred in Indianapolis, where there was a mass casualty situation where 5 people were wounded and I believe 2 young people lost their life. There's so much pain and trauma in the family of one of the more notable victims that have pretty much has made national news. Mind you, there are 2 young people that lost their lives. One was the age 15, the other one 16. But we've only been talking about the one that was identified. I don't know how they were identified because typically the news doesn't identify people of that age when they unfortunately meet an ending to their lives. But this person was identified and his name is Xavion Jackson. And we did a little bit of a deep dive into the background of Xavion's family. Big shout out to Sunshine, who sent me some really good information, and the research crew who filled in the gaps after that. And what we find is that there is a cycle of trauma and pain that exists in that family. And it made it possible for this to happen, this tragedy to happen. We're going to explore that cycle of pain. And I think it's appropriate to talk about it because the mother actually wrote a book on it. All right. So normally we wouldn't talk about these things out of respect for the family, but we're talking about it because there are once again lessons to learn. And the mother wrote a book on it. She wanted the world to understand what she went through. This will blow your mind, ladies and gentlemen. So before we get started, please hit that like and subscribe button. We do appreciate all the support that we get. For those of you who will be joining us tonight on this impromptu live, I want to start the show off first, though, by playing an update to the mass casualty situation. Of course, I'm saying it that way because of YouTube. But I'm going to give you guys an update on that real quick before we jump into just how tragic this young man's story is. And we're going to focus primarily on the mother. Aki made the thumbnail. I was like, Aki, you know what? I think we're going to be focusing more on the mother. But I said, you know what? It all ties in, so we're just going to leave it as it is. But we're going to be focusing more on the mother. I believe her name is pronounced Xiyya Jackson. All right, so real quick, let's bring you in for that update so you guys can see what has transpired since the 4th of July when we all should be celebrating the birth of this nation, this great nation that we live in. Instead, when you have a whole bunch of wayward teens without direction, without parenting, without solid grounding of morality, these tragedies happen on even the most special days, such as the celebration of the birth of this great, beautiful nation. Let's keep going.
Thanks, Chris. Now at 5, investigators still trying to figure out what led to a mass shooting downtown, not too far from where 4th of July celebrations had just wrapped up.
That shooting killed 2 teenagers and injured 5 others Saturday morning. 4 teens now face charges in the case. Officers were called to a disturbance when they heard shots fired right in the heart of downtown at Washington and Illinois streets. As we said, gunfire took the lives of 2 teens, 16-year-old Xavion Jackson and 15-year-old Azarian Cole. CBS 4.
All right, so this is the first time that I heard them identify that other young man who unfortunately lost his life. So definitely prayers go out to that young man's family. We did not know his identity before, so we could not shout him out and definitely ask for prayers. Let's keep going.
Curry brings us more from that night and the charges those involved now face.
Why are they? No.
People ran in fear as soon as shots rang out. This was the scene downtown near Washington and Illinois streets just before 1:30 a.m. on July 5th.
I was heartbroken, saddened by how our city is looking, to people across the country. But more than that, the families that were affected by the violence.
Now 4 teens are being charged for illegally possessing guns that evening, with the youngest at just 13 years old.
It's ridiculous that a 13-year-old is alleged to have had a firearm. And nothing good's going to come from a kid having a gun. They're either going to hurt themselves or they're going to hurt somebody else.
One of the four, 17-year-old Vincent Linking Jr., is being charged as an adult due to prior convictions and faces additional charges.
In addition, some of the other individuals who are involved in this process, we're also going to be filing waivers on those individuals to waive them into adult court.
So basically their lives are destroyed, where they could have just been incarcerated until they're 21 years old. Now they're looking at possible life sentences with the possibility of parole. Remember, some people have it misconstrued. They believe that the Supreme Court ruled that juveniles can't get life sentences. That's not true. The ruling from the Supreme Court is juveniles can't get life sentences without the possibility of parole, which means that you still can serve the rest of your life in prison, depending on the severity of the crime, if the parole board deems you not suitable for parole. Big shout out to Aaron Murphy, celebrating 3 months as a White Shield member. She says, hello, strategic friends, sending love. Appreciate you for supporting the channel in the way that you do. Let's keep going, man.
Because again, it's just this level of frustration that I think all of us feel when kids have these guns.
Community groups like New Boy know there is more to do than just enforcing the law. They've been a part of the conversation to make a change going forward and connect with some of these kids going down the wrong path.
I think it needs to happen sooner than later, because we see our kids lying in the middle of a street downtown with a bullet in their head. If that's not a wake-up call, I don't know what is.
The prosecutor adds that not all of the parents involved have been cooperative with their office or law enforcement throughout this process.
Did they know or should they have known that their child had a firearm? And if that's the case, that's very much something that the prosecutor's office and IMPD wants to look into to see if it's something that can be prosecuted.
Yeah, I really think that we need to follow that model. What was the name of the young man, Ethan? Crumbly? The Crumblies. We need to follow the model of the Crumblies, where if we can prove definitively, beyond reasonable doubt, I don't want us just chasing people, doing wild goose chases on parents, but if we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that parents were negligent in keeping their children out of these type of situations, therefore which would have prevented these crimes, we certainly need to start charging the parents, especially when we live in a system where some of these kids will not be charged as adults, and therefore they'll take lives and only do a few years in prison and then get a clean slate. Because understand, after you do that juvenile time, that record gets expunged, it gets sealed. So now you get out of juvenile detention at 21 years old because you murdered somebody at 15, 16, whatever. And now your record is sealed and you can go get any job you want now, and you never have to tell anyone that you ever committed a homicide. You can literally erase that chapter of your life and pretend like it never existed, because there'll be no record of it. No record whatsoever. So if we are going to have a system where some juveniles will be able to get away pretty much with murder, then we need to hold somebody accountable, and maybe that somebody are the parents. But let's keep going.
Now, IMPD has already begun making changes since the shooting. These are some of their mobile trailer cameras already up downtown, so officers can see what's going on in real time and respond before the trigger is pulled. Police add that their minor curfew will also be enforced going forward.
There are some ideas that are being brought to the table. I'm just hoping that in 3 or 4 days or 2 weeks from now, we don't forget about it and we don't put ourselves in the same situation.
Yeah, but once again, as we discussed on the other show when we talked about this, these are what can the police do to, like, we're not in Minority Report where you do pre-crime. You guys ever seen Minority Report with Tom Cruise, where they have these psychics that could predict the crime before it happens? We can't do that in the real world. Okay, so all this stuff is for after the fact, all right? And I'm going to tell you as a law enforcement officer that there's no way, like they just said, put these cameras up to stop stuff before it happens. Okay, maybe 1 out of 10 times you might see a disruption, an argument, and you might send a patrol car over there and they'll defuse it before bullets fly. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to be responding after the bullets fly because you don't have enough cops to respond to all the different disturbances you're going to witness on these cameras. People have conflict. That's just the way it goes. You only have a finite amount of law enforcement officers. So once again, we're asking, what can the government do to save us from ourselves, when in all actuality, we have to be honest with ourselves that the saving starts with us. The saving literally starts with us. It's about telling those parents to parent their children, telling those parents to give their children dignity, to give their children class, to give their children self-worth so that they don't go out in downtown Indianapolis and downtown New York and downtown Chicago and downtown LA and do what these children are doing, which is taking their own lives and sometimes, more often than not, taking the lives of innocent people. So let's keep going. But I definitely disagree there where we're putting it on the backs of law enforcement and on society to fix what should be fixed inside of the home. But we're going to talk more about that as we do a deep dive into the family life of Xavion Jackson. Let's keep going.
Where before we had a mass shooting downtown.
Reporting downtown, Claire Curry, CBS 4 News.
IMPD released a statement today calling on parents to know where their kids are at all times.
There we go.
That statement reads in part, law enforcement is not a substitute for active parenting.
That's right.
We are not equipped to babysit,
Yes.
and we will not assume that role.
I never saw this before. And notice that this law enforcement agency literally said exactly what I just said. This is my first time watching this news clipping. And they said it literally exactly what I said, because it's not that I'm a psychic or I'm a genius. Probably more of a genie ass. It's because it's common sense. It's common sense. Law enforcement is not a substitute for active parenting.
We are not equipped to babysit, and we will not assume that role. Police.
It's the job of the parents to protect your children. Why is a 15-year-old outside at 1 a.m. unsupervised? Why is a 16-year-old outside 1 a.m. unsupervised? Let's keep going.
We'll be cracking down on the juvenile curfew enforcement from here on out.
So the last sentence is, we're not a substitute for parenting. We're not babysitters, but we're still going to have to enforce a curfew that should start where, ladies and gentlemen? Where should that curfew start? In the home. So they still have to act as parents, whether they want to or not. Because of bad parenting, they're still being forced to be parents. They're still being forced to be babysitters because they now still have to enforce a curfew that's set by the government to keep your children safe, because some parents don't want to be parents. Let's get into what we discovered. First of all, I want to read this article for you guys, and this is going to break your heart. And this is for the mother. I believe her name is pronounced Xiyya Jackson. I could be wrong. Sometimes people spell their names differently, and you have to hear it to know what it sounds like, because sometimes how it's spelled and how one would normally pronounce it is not how somebody wants to pronounce their name. We find that a lot in America, right? So the mother loses 3 sons to gun violence, most recently in Indy's downtown mass unaliving. Back-to-back calls filed into Xiyya Jackson. Hold on. My apologies, guys. Thought I got a message from Aki, but that was a false alarm. And let me put this on vibrate so it's not ringing in the background. Okay, let's jump into this. Back-to-back calls filed into Xiyya Jackson's cell phone while she was sleeping at her Tennessee home. Family and Indianapolis police started calling around 1:44 a.m. July 5th because they needed to deliver heartbreaking news. Her 16-year-old son was gone. Xavion Jackson, the youngest of 6, was one of 2 teens killed during a mass shooting in downtown Indianapolis. 5 more people between the ages of 6 and 21 were also injured. He said, "I'm coming home after the 4th, mama, I promise." That's the last words that he said to his mother, ladies and gentlemen. Xiyya Jackson told Indy Star, "This is my baby boy, and this is my 3rd kid who has died of gun violence. It's not fair." 3rd kid she lost to gun violence. The 42-year-old mother of 4 boys and twin girls lost another son to homicide when he was shot in January of 2024 at Stanley Trader Park. His case remains unsolved. The oldest son was shot and killed in 2021 outside of a Waffle House in Pendleton Pike. It was determined to be self-defense. So basically, somebody shot that son, and the police said that the person who shot her son was in the right, was justified in using deadly physical force. They did not elaborate as to what that son was doing to be justifiably killed by a citizen, but alas, he was justifiably killed, and the person who killed him is still out there living their life because they committed no crime. Xavion Jackson was pronounced dead at the scene of the mass shooting that has caused citywide outrage. The problem of youth with guns downtown has circulated between City County Council Mayor Joe Hogsett, Prosecutor Ryan Mears, law enforcement, and community leaders since the shooting. Parents and guardians have been asked to step up and get better control of their kids, but for Jackson and her family, the noise of now comes a little too late. Now, how is that a little too late? I don't like the way that they phrase that in this article, because it's kind of like, well, now we're saying for that to happen when that's something that should have happened a long time ago within this household. But we're going to see why these kids were pretty much doing whatever they wanted to do, and we're not doing this to hurt the mother. We're not here to trample on this mother's back after she's been through so much loss. We're just here to talk reality so that if there's somebody out there who's experiencing what this mother is experiencing or has experienced, they wake up and they do the things that they need to do, not just to save their own lives, but the lives of their children, because the decisions of parents matter. It matters. Even if you go through a life of trauma, once you make children, you have to find a way to fight through that trauma and give your children a chance of not continuing that generational cycle of pain. Because in this family, trauma was in their DNA. We're going to talk about that, man. Very sad stuff. Very, very sad stuff. So parents and guardians have been asked to step up and get better control of their kids. But for Jackson and her family, the noise of now comes a little too late, especially when there's been a family history of violence that has plagued them for generations. Let's get into that family history of violence. This is a picture of Xiyya and her many children. She made a lot of kids. And I don't know why. Some of that may have been a way of coping with her trauma, but I feel like the trauma that she went through, much of it was not her fault. I don't know if any of it was her fault, but I know at least some of that main trauma that we're going to talk about is not her fault. I don't think she ever got the help that she needed to get through that trauma so that it would not become a generational trauma. But let's keep going. In 1992, Indianapolis Recorder News headlines reads, ex-boyfriend confesses to pre-Thanksgiving killing. A man told police he became upset while he and Rosa Pearl Jackson, 42, were walking along the edge of a river because she no longer wanted to be with him. He confessed to choking and leaving her to drown. Her body was found in 1993. Months later, her body was found. That was Xiyya Jackson's mother. She was 10 years old at the time. So this trauma started 10 years old. 10 years old. 10 years old when her mother passed away. Due to a boyfriend who was upset that she no longer wanted to be with him. That's where that trauma started. Let's keep going. Years later, that type of fatal generational trauma would plague her again when she got into a decade-long relationship with a man who would father some of her children. I killed their dad, Jackson told Indy Star. I was a victim of domestic violence. I was defending myself from their father and murdered him. So now, some of her children, decades later, she would kill the father of some of her children due to domestic violence. Jackson shot Vincent Lanking Sr. at a Budget 8 Inn motel in March of 2017. She would sit in jail for a year and a half until being found not guilty of voluntary manslaughter and aggravated battery in 2018. She wrote a book about the ordeal called No Vacancy, My Story of Domestic Violence, Murder, and the Children Caught in the Crossfire. Wow. The day after I was released from jail, my sister was stabbed over 50 times, Jackson said. On August 19, 2018, Vicky Jackson, 45, was stabbed with a broken wine bottle by another woman during a fight, according to court documents. Surveillance footage captured the killing in an apartment hallway on the north side. So then she lost her sister. She lost her mother. She killed her baby's father. And then she lost her sister. Lost her mother to homicide. She committed a homicide, although not guilty of that homicide. And then she lost her sister of homicide. Let's keep going. Her oldest son, Robert Howard Jr., 22, was shot and killed in 2021 following a dispute in a Waffle House parking lot on Pendleton Pike. After he died, she moved to Tennessee and hoped that change would be better for her remaining children. But my boys kept running back to Indianapolis. So now we start seeing the fact that, remember, these kids have no father. There's no men in their life. One man is dead, probably justifiably so. It's not up to me to judge. A jury said that she's not guilty. I believe in our system, so she's not guilty. But then there was another baby father, and that baby father's not around. Notice that the last name of her youngest, which is Xavion, is Jackson. That is her last name. That's not the baby daddy's last name. So whenever you see a young man or a kid or whatever with their mother's last name, it's most often because the father was not in the kid's life from day one. So there's no father figures in this household. I'm pretty sure she's struggling. There's times that she was homeless, etc. And now these kids are just running the streets. We're going to read some of that. They're going to give us an insight into some of that. But my boys kept running back to Indianapolis, Jackson said. They said Tennessee was lame and they wanted to be with their friends. Plus, we still had family in Indy. There were times when they just up and leave and I had no idea where they were. Hence, you end up having a young man. Where's a good picture of this? Is this one? Oh, let me see. Maybe it's this one over here. Right here. Hence you have a young man with neck tattoos. Tattoos all over his body. He's just 16 years old. He's just running the streets, doing whatever he wants. Mommy said she'd just wake up, they'd be gone. And she'd have no idea where they were. Is that parenting? No. It's a breakdown in the household. A breakdown in that hierarchy of adult and child and respect. Let's keep going. Police reports reveal Jackson made numerous runaway reports from 2019 to 2023. When the kids were found, police would bring them back across state lines to their mother. Her other son, Rondre Jackson, 19, was shot and killed in a neighborhood near Keystone Avenue and Stanley Strader Park in 2024. Xiyya Jackson believes one of his friends set him up, but police have released few details and no arrests have been made. So that's unsolved right there. Unsolved so far, that is. I'm just here. I'm trying to get my strength, Jackson said. I feel empty. I just don't understand why this keeps happening to me. I wasn't hard enough on them. She's talking about her parenting on the children. It keeps happening because of the generational trauma. The generational trauma that has not been addressed in this household. Her remaining son, the namesake of the man she killed 8 years ago, was with his brother in downtown. The 17-year-old was arrested along with 3 other teens and charged with dangerous possession of a firearm, resisting law enforcement, and obstruction of justice. The only son she has left is now in jail, and he took part in the shooting, whether he's retaliating because the shooters were shooting at him or he was the instigator. We don't know, but he took part in the shooting that ended in the unaliving of his own brother. You guys see how deep this is going. But we're not done yet. So let's go into the whole trial that involved the mother. Woman not guilty in shooting her boyfriend at motel, murder charge dismissed. This is the mother. This is Xiyya Jackson. A 36-year-old Indianapolis woman had murder charges dismissed as a jury found her not guilty in a 2017 homicide at a motel. Xiyya Jackson, 36, of Indianapolis, was released from jail after being found not guilty of voluntary manslaughter and aggravated battery Wednesday in Marion Superior Court, Criminal Division 4. She had initially been charged with the murder of Vincent Lanking, 32, and what police called domestic violence. Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department were called to a room at Budget 8 Inn, 6850 East 21st Street, near 21st Street and Shadeland Avenue. Around 11:30 a.m., March 31st, 2017, Jackson was accused of shooting her boyfriend in the head, police said. Shot him in the head. Wow. And a 3-year-old child was about a foot away during the shooting. I wonder which one of her children witnessed that at 3 years old. And we believe, oh, they're not going to remember anything. Yeah, they probably do remember it. And that violence is now etched in their soul. The child was not injured. According to court documents, Jackson and Lankin had been together for about 10 years, and Lankin is the father of 2 of Jackson's 6 children. In 2017, Jackson told police that there has been domestic violence in the past with Lankin, and he also had kidnapped her before, according to court documents. They had been arguing prior to the shooting. So we have that. Let's go over to the Instagram. This is the mother. This is her page. I find it a little bit odd but I don't know the last time this page was updated, but all these pictures were of these kids when they were young. I don't know which of these kids are grandkids or how many of them are actually, the young ones, but this is the mother. That's the mother. I never really understand it. I'm not judging, but, my generation at least, because she's my generation, but as a young man, my generation of parents, which would probably include her parents, and unfortunately, she lost her parents. And some of you may agree or disagree with me, and I know that times change and attitudes change and cultures change, but I grew up with a mother that looked like a mother. And I know that femininity means that women want to, make themselves look nice and stuff like that. I grew up with a mother that certainly loved to look nice, loved to, show her femininity. But you could always tell that she was a mother. There was always something dignified about her, when I was young. And of course, my mother is just the same as dignified and classy as she is now. But I'm talking about when I grew up in the past, when I'm talking in past tense. She always carried herself like a mother, And so I look at this young woman, we might be around the same age, but I think I might have a year or two on her, whether that qualifies me to call her a young woman. And I'll just take it as a compliment. You see the big eyelashes, something that, I see my 17-year-old rather, experimenting with. Even she's now growing out of it. At 16, you never saw her without her eyelashes. And now she's 17 going on 18. You don't see her with the eyelashes no more. She's grown out of it. You see this grown woman with these humongous eyelashes, these body implant jewels on her face and et cetera. And it's, the blonde hair that doesn't match her ethnicity or skin tone, etc. Listen, I might be nitpicking. I understand that. But I think the way that you carry yourself is the way that you want the world to see you. And it's also a reflection of who you are on the inside. And I think that goes a long way. It really does. Especially when we look at the whole package and we see that this woman is raising these children and they keep dying. And they're dying for the same reasons, gun violence. And It's real sad. Aaron Murphy with $20 super chat. Thank you so much. Says the absence of fathers is where it is all at. I agree 1,000%. I really do agree with that. Thank you so much for the support, Aaron. So now let's keep going. What kind of cruise is that? Anybody know what kind of cruise that is? Is that the Carnival cruise? I gotta turn it off because it got music in the background. Okay. I definitely commend her for writing a book, man. I think that's really awesome that she wrote a book talking about her ordeal. Look how beautiful this kid is. Look at the eyes on this kid. Look how handsome this little boy is. Little cutie pies, man. Cutie pies. Gotta love these kids, man. Let's keep going. Celebration the life of Robert, no vacancy. I think that might be her son. Big shout out to Sam I Am Texas with a 5 free gift membership to the membership. For everybody who won that 5 free gift membership, please thank Sam I Am Texas. Thank you so much. It's very kind of you. Let's keep going. All right. Okay. So I found a petition that she put in, filed in 2022 to expunge and seal her record. She was found not guilty, but I think what she wants to do is kind of like remove her prints, remove and seal all records of it so that it doesn't show up in any police databases. This is pretty common stuff here when people beat cases. Just because you beat the case doesn't mean it's not out the system. You could go for a job. They'll still see that you was arrested and charged with it. And then you have to explain to them that you were found not guilty, etc. So it's pretty common for people to seal these records so that when you apply for a job, when you apply for, you go to the government, you want to work for the government or whatever, there's no record of it ever existing. So this is what Xiyya was attempting to do through the court system with the murder conviction that she beat. This is her book, No Vacancy, that she wrote. Let's read a little bit about it. No Vacancy, my story of domestic violence, murder, and the children caught in the crossfire. It is a story too terrible to tell, too terrifying to hear, too unbelievable to survive, but too important to conceal. But Xiyya Jackson did miraculously survive. As you read her story, you'll be drawn into the world of domestic violence and learn what happens when love turns to pain and everybody involved pays the price. Some pay the ultimate price. This harrowing story of abuse, kidnapping, and terror that results in a murder charge will keep you riveted with every turn of the page. Okay. Xiyya Jackson, pronounced Xiyya, so it's good that I pronounced it correctly, is the mother of 6 children, but states that she has a 7th bonus child. She hails from Indianapolis, Indiana. She is a twin in a family of twins and has a set of twin daughters. She hails from a large family of 10 sisters and 2 brothers, one of whom is her fraternal twin. She enjoys singing, shopping, and helping others. She enjoys giving advice to others about her harrowing ordeal to help them escape. She is working to establish a foundation that will help more women escape domestic violence with a focus on helping teens learn the basics of healthy dating. Okay. It's 95 pages, published in 2022. I definitely have to say that I have a lot of respect for her for writing about her ordeal and sharing it with the world. I think there's a lot of people who can learn from any story such as hers. But this is this generational trauma that inflicts this family. And it started with her mother. And then it perpetuated with her. What I think is the problem is that I don't believe that when she was 10 years old that she got enough support from us as a society. I honestly believe that when people experience this type of trauma, it should be automatic that we get folks that kind of help, you know, the help that they need to get through that trauma. I think when you leave it up to families with the limited resources that a lot of these families have, it's not going to happen. And therefore, they're bound to repeat those cycles. The mother was in an abusive relationship. The abusive relationship ended up taking the mother's life. The daughter gets older. She ends up in an abusive relationship. The abusive relationship ends in her taking the abuser's life. She then goes on to have 6 children in at least 2 unstable relationships. We don't know if she has just 2 baby daddies or more. We could just confirm that she had 2 baby daddies. She ends up having 6 children in 2 unstable relationships. One resulting in a homicide that ended up being justified because of a not guilty verdict on her behalf. The other one, we don't even know where the guy is. The children don't even have his last name. The children have their mother's last name. These children are now raised in what we pretty much know is an unstable household. From the mother's very own words, the children would sometimes get up and disappear and go to Indiana. She won't even know where she's at. There's records of multiple missing person reports that was made by this mother to find her children. She doesn't have a grasp on these children. And then these kids, the streets start raising them. And now we have at least one instance where one of her children was deemed to be the aggressor to the point where the law said that taking his life was justified by the citizen he had the altercation with. What does that tell us? Without knowing the details of that case, we're telling us this young person had a lack of impulse control, that he could get so upset that another person could take his life, and that unaliving is deemed justified by the law. Then we have another instance where the mother believes that the son's friends set him up and took his life. That is yet to be unsolved. What kind of friends is this son involved with? What kind of circles is this son traveling in that he could deal with people that would have the capacity, the wherewithal, or even the desire to take his life, and hence take his life, and he's now an unsolved case. And then we have the third son, who's 16 years old, out and about in the wild in Indianapolis in a very unsafe area at an unsafe time, with tattoos all over his neck, all over his arms, and he gets taken out by gun violence. And then the last remaining son, who's 17 years old, he's in jail for shooting a gun during the altercation that resulted in his younger brother losing his life. The only children we have not heard about from Xiyya Jackson is her twin daughters. And then we got to ask ourselves that question: are they now continuing that cycle of generational pain and getting into their own unstable and abusive relationships? This is very sad stuff here, ladies and gentlemen. It's a reflection of the current state of our society, because the Jacksons weren't the only ones out there in downtown Indianapolis on July 4th in the wee morning of July 5th. They weren't the only ones out there during the witching hour. There were other kids out there. There are 5 juveniles that have now been since charged in conjunction with the murder of Xavion Jackson. And that's not even talking about the 15-year-old who was also murdered out there. There's a whole community of children who are being unmanaged, unsupervised, unmentored, who are growing up without self-worth, without class, without boundaries, without conflict resolution, where a 13-year-old is amongst the children who were arrested for shooting Xavion, or at least taking part in the shooting of Xavion. The lessons we take away from this situation is twofold, ladies and gentlemen. Number one, it starts at home. And number two, if we as a society don't start taking this seriously, start A, putting consequences for bad parenting on the table, whereas if your child is committing crimes, then you yourself might have to assist in paying for those crimes. And B, we do need to invest more in our youth. We don't need to invest more in our youth to do the job of parents. We need to invest more in our youth to buttress the job of parents. So we need to bring back after-school programs. So many of them have been cut decades ago and never been restored. But on the flip side, if your child is not going to school and we don't see you making an effort to get that child to school, to seek that child counseling, you should be charged with child neglect. You know who tried to do that and not turn this into politics, but it popped in my brain? You know who had that idea? Kamala Harris in California. Parents of truant students under Kamala Harris would be charged for child neglect and child abuse. And I agree with that 1,000%. Now, if you are a parent whose child is constantly truant and you're involved with the school, you're trying your best to get the child counseling. You put in New York, we have something called a PINS warrant, a person in need of assistance or something, I don't know. Person in need of assistance or something like that, where the courts are involved. You voluntarily go to the courts and say, my child is out of control. I need help reining my child in. And the courts is assisting you with counseling and all this stuff. And there's a police officer that's introduced to your child, a youth officer that knows your child, will go looking for your child, try and befriend your child, open your child up to programs and stuff. If you're doing that stuff, then of course I don't agree that you should be charged. I don't agree with that. But if you're not doing that stuff, you're not taking every single waking moment of your life to try and rein your child in and save your child's life, I think you should be charged. I think you should. We should have curfews when needed. Not every community needs a curfew because they don't have these issues. But we should have curfews when needed, like they're trying to do in Indianapolis. That's buttressing the job of parents. But if that child is violating a curfew under your watch, then you need to pay too. If there's a fine, you need to pay that fine. The job of government is not to replace the duty. Notice I did not say job. The job of the government, that's a job, is not to replace the duty. That's spiritual. That's spiritual. The duty of a parent. At the very most, it's to support and help. But the duty lies within the parent to protect your children. And it starts from young. If you are a inadequate parent, for whatever reason, whether it be trauma, whether it be you never were taught how to be a parent, and you didn't have the wherewithal to learn how to be a parent, because I don't think any of us were taught how to be parents. I think we had to learn how to be parents. Whatever your excuse is, if you decide to bring children in this world and you aren't doing your best to make sure that those children have a good life, and you don't have to be rich to give your kids a good life. I grew up dirt poor. And the secret sauce was love. A mother that went to every recital and said, that's all it took. All it took was a mother that came to every single recital and said, yay, good job. I'm here for you. All it took was a mother that saw my pictures and said, great job. That's the best picture I've ever seen in my life. All it takes is love. It doesn't take money. It takes love. We're not doing eugenics here. We're not saying only rich people and middle-class people should have children. We're not asking people to purchase a child license where only people of means can purchase the privilege of making a child. No, anybody can make a child. The secret sauce is love. And when you love your child, you're not going to do like what I see when I go to the bodega in the Bronx. True story. I walk into the bodega in the Bronx, and this young African-American female is buying something, and a young African-American male comes in the store, and he greets the female, "What's up? How you doing? Da-da-da-da." And she's like, "Yeah, what up?" And then he looks at her young son, and he goes, "What up, little N-word?" And the young son is that's not his son. I don't know what the father is, but that's not his son. He tells the little boy, this is the mother's friend. Lover, friend, I don't know. He goes, "What up, little N-word?" And the little boy is looking at him perplexed, like, I don't know. Like, what am I supposed to say to that? You just called me an N-word. And then the mother looks at the boy and says, "Little N-word." He said, "What up? Say hi back, N-word." This boy is like 4 years old, 5 years old. And I'm sitting there like this. And I had to close my jaw because I didn't want no beef. I'm in the bodega. I'm armed. I'm an officer on the law. I'm off duty. I don't want this dude to come and try and start fight with me. Well, what you looking at, N-word and all this extra stuff? I don't want no problem with the YGs. That's what they call them now, right? YNs or the YGs. I don't want no problem with them. I'm of a different cloth. I'm not in your world. I'm just visiting, okay? And I if they'd have looked my way, they'd have seen that I was like, because I could not believe what I saw. And what I took from that is this little boy doesn't even have a chance. He doesn't have a chance. Before he even understood what it is to be himself, he already was told he's an N-word. And it really made me understand the sorry state of our society right now. So when people talk about, and I'm not going to turn this into politics, I'm just going to make this one small point here, so please bear with me. When people talk about white supremacy and racism and all that stuff, I say to myself, well, you don't need Ku Klux Klan running around with hoods, burning crosses on people's lawns. The mission has already been accomplished. When you have a black mother looking at her son and saying, "Say hello, N-word." Whatever those supremacists wanted to accomplish after Reconstruction has been accomplished. You don't need to do nothing else. You don't have to burn crosses on people's lawns. You don't have to kill anybody. You have to lynch anybody. You have to do none of that stuff. We do it to ourselves. We literally do it to ourselves. If you're a white supremacist, all you have to do is get a comfortable chair like this, a nice cold beverage like this, sit back, and relax and enjoy the show. Hey there, Frankie. They doing our job for us there, boy. Oh, yes, they are. That's all you got to do. Because the job is being done by us. And it all stems from trauma. Untreated trauma, generational trauma we refuse to talk about, we refuse to address, we refuse to fix. And I'm going to end it here, but I want to leave you with one example of why things will never, it's like what Tupac says, some things will never change. That's just the way it is. Things will never be the same. That's just the way it is. Oh, yeah. some things will never change. It's Tupac. I'm going to give you an example. See if I go here, come up here. And it's called a lack of accountability. Parents and guardians have been asked to step up and get better control of their kids. But for Jackson and her family, the noise of now comes a little too late. Now, you could decipher that however you want to. But when I read that statement by that reporter, that's not a statement that Xiyya Jackson made. She didn't say that. That's the reporter interpreting the situation. It's once again, in my opinion, a reflection of how so many parts of our society refuse to hold people accountable for their own decisions and their own actions. We should not need to tell parents to get better control of their kids. And since that should be something that parents do automatically, then the noise of now should not matter, because that statement is irrelevant, because it's the job of a parent to have control of their children. Police should not have to tell parents that. And if these parents, not just Xiyya, but all those parents who allowed their children out there at that time without supervision, if all of them practiced supervising their children and knowing what their children were doing and understanding what their children were doing and controlling their children, these babies would still be alive. Xavion would still be alive, and the 15-year-old whose name escapes me, he would be alive too. Before I go to bed tonight, I'm going to get on my hands and knees, and I promise you this, and I'm going to pray for Xiyya Jackson, because Xiyya Jackson has been through a lot, and I think it needs to stop. Xiyya, you need to stop suffering from the sins of the past. It's time to get the help that you need to save those remaining children that you have. Xiyya Jackson needs our prayers, ladies and gentlemen. And while we're at it, let's pray for every single young person who was wounded out there that day. There's 5 children who are wounded. And remember, when they say wounded, it's just like the military when we used to have all those wars and they'd say 1,200 people wounded, 400 people, 20 people wounded. They never tell you how they're wounded. Wounded means you're still alive, but that doesn't mean that you didn't lose an eye or a leg, or you can't walk, or you have TBI and now you can't even put a sentence together. They never go into those details. So let's pray that those wounded children get a speedy recovery, and let's pray for the families of those who have been lost in this tragedy. I pray for you guys, and I thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you so much. Hope you guys have been enjoying our We On That Ass news segment. We're going to keep doing that because I really like it, and I think it's a little bit more streamlined than what we do here on the long format show. So I hope you're enjoying that. It's really good, and a big shout out to Aki for that really nice intro. We need to revamp the intro we have now. I think we've outgrown it. So Aki, when you get a chance, whip us up something interesting, we can put on the main show. But definitely love the new intro. I know a lot of you guys love it too. You guys have just been showering with the praise on the new intro. Yeah, it's awesome. So she wants to do some extra stuff. She want to film some. All right, we're going to do that then. We're going to make that happen. It's hot. It's summertime. There's no excuse. When we first talked about it, it was cold. Now it's hot. We could get out there and definitely go and film that extra footage so we can get a really nice intro for you guys. All right, guys, you guys have a wonderful night. Big shout out to all of the members who joined me tonight. For those of you who are not members, we look forward to the day that you join the family and you support the channel. Other than that, please hit the like button on your way out the door. And also big shout out to all the Patreon members as well. Always remember, the Patreon is where we have our personal conversations. And lastly, to all of my moderators, I want to thank all of them: Aki, Erica B, A Obsidian, You guys are amazing. Big shout out to Aaron Murphy with the $20 super chat. Who's the other person who dropped that very kind Sam I Am Texas. Mama Bear is now a recruit. Thank you so much for joining the family, Mama Bear. We do appreciate you. You guys are amazing. I see you guys on the next one. Let's get that outro up and ready. Strategic is out of here. Peace.